Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Build Amazing Things Securely. My name is Laura Belmain, and today we are getting into all things health. We have a special guest today, Lisa Hall, who is joining us from Colour. Now, I have a rule, as you know, I do not do the introductions, so I'm going to ask you, Lisa, firstly, how are you today? And welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Good start. Right. Next up, who are you as a human, Lisa?
Ooh, I love this. I love this question. Well, my name is Lisa. I am in security, as you know, and I kind of happened into the space. I am also a Bay Area native in California here, which I think there's a handful of us left. Um, and yeah, so I didn't, I guess as a human, I imagine that I'm a pretty empathetic person. And I didn't get into security based out of like the traditional technology CS route. So I have a myriad of things that I'm into and
Now I have
some
more
like,
questions than I have
I
answers.
know, like, what
I,
are
I,
these?
I love this because I get the chance to ask people, well, so what was your background if you just happened into security? Where did you
Yeah,
come from?
well, I kind of jumped around colleges for a bit. I went to a few different art schools,
Oh, nice.
went to
Awesome.
fashion school. Oh, yeah, totally not related to CS at
No, I
all.
love it.
Um, it's wild, but I do think security is a creative industry, and you have to think creatively to solve some of these problems. So I think it aligns well.
No,
Um,
absolutely. And we've had folks that we've talked to who've done everything from jazz musicians before they were security people,
oh,
right across
love
the
it.
spectrum. So, welcome, fellow arts person. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
the reason that we like asking, about you as a human is because security isn't about anyone having, this giant handbook that was given to us at the end of college and suddenly we're, the guru in the space. It's about people. It's people making decisions and trying their best to protect what matters to them. And in the context of this podcast, it's amazing technology and things. So, Lisa, that brings me to what do you do as a job right now? You just sort of I love you, you're very understated. You're like, oh, I do security stuff. Let's dig into that. What specific security stuff do you do?
Well, today I am at ColorHealth, and I lead the security team here, security, GRC, IT, the whole bucket. And yeah, we are first and foremost a healthcare company. We started off doing genetic testing, and fortunately, we had the tools and resources to shift during the pandemic to also assist in a lot of COVID testing. We have a lab, the actual lab, people that look like they're doctors and with suits and things. And
That is, I've seen Lego sets. They have those in. So yeah, that must be
yes,
right.
I'm like, you just look smarter than me, and I need you to just do your thing with your science.
Go do science.
um,
Awesome. Cool.
I could do science. This is coming from art background, right? I'm like, what?
It's all good. We're going to get
It's
to
fine.
this. Okay, so we are doing health now. One of the things we do in the show is we dig into different verticals, everything from esports to fashion to health, and health isn't just one thing. I think that's what I'm learning as I go along. So, you look after the security, but that must be quite a broad set of technologies and things that you're protecting. Can you give us like a high level view of the types of things that you try and have to protect when you're in a company like Color Health?
Yeah. Yeah. I think health is, like you mentioned, it is a really interesting space and very broad as well. And so, one of the things that struck me when I first joined was I was at SaaS companies before. I was at PagerDuty for about 3 years, still sensitive information, but different types of information. So, we have people's healthcare data and their genetic data. And we have a lab. And this was, a long time ago, not to date myself, but like I've worked in places that had data centers and like not everything was in the cloud and you tour the data center. And this was the first time in a long time where I had like a physical space. It wasn't just like, yes, it's an office, we have a badge, we make sure people are escorted, yada yada, like things are fine. This is like a lab and a space where like the actual data is physical and traveling around and needs to be processed physically. And so it was a very different mindset. So we not only have the data once it's in a non-physical form and traveling around the internet, we also have it in a physical form, and just being able to kind of look at risk and threats from that standpoint was a whole new and interesting world.
And I think this is really well timed. I think a lot of us, many of us have been around a while, we have the grey hairs to prove it, but I definitely tend to forget these days that, we focus so much on secure development and application security like it's just the code that we build, but our systems aren't just code. They're the people that use them. They're the weird paper copy data that's somewhere over there. They're all sorts of things. And it's only when you protect all of those together that we can say that we're doing our job. So talk me through this. So what kinds of technologies are we talking, custom built applications? Are we talking about off the shelf things? How does health work? Is it as a technology company?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. And we probably find this in a lot of companies where sometimes it's like, hey, this is going to be better if we just build it ourselves because it's very nuanced and kind of with healthcare too. It's
Mm.
like, this is just our jam. This is the thing we're discovering now and creating it now. Hence the outfits and the labs and the technology we're making. But we also use a lot of like standard tools, and we are in the cloud. So we use a lot of like SaaS-based tools, like standard technology security tools. Like in the back end, a lot of I think what we do is very similar to your standard SaaS company, just with the nuances of, hey, we've got this test strip of someone's like COVID testing or even, STI testing. Like we probably don't want this just laying around or getting out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think about risk models a lot. And we talk about threat modeling and we talk about the data that we're storing, but I mean, the breadth of health data and the impacts it could have on a person are huge. So, if you're able to share with us, how do you threat model how the data works, on the sensitivity of the data that you're holding? How do you think about that as a security person? Because it feels to me, but I'm not from this space, like there's a much broader range of impacts that you would be playing with than just, hey, we lost some dollars and cents, although dollars and cents will be in
Right.
there, definitely in there somewhere.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Oh, we'll get fined, for HIPAA violation for this amount, but what's the actual risk? And I think to me, that's the fun and exciting part of working at different companies because you get to think about these problems and they're different for each place you go. Like it's obviously like, oh, yep, if we lose some stuff, we're gonna have to pay for credit monitoring or be fined, right? Like the dollars and cents, as you say. But the threat modeling part is really interesting because you get to look at it and say, for us, for example, public knowledge, we do COVID testing, we do STI testing, we do genetic testing. So the risk of a COVID test getting out, I don't know, maybe not as risky as if someone's HIV positive. And then
Mm.
you look at like, well, who would be looking to get this information? Like, are we talking about like a parent, a partner, your employer?
Mm.
Like, who would be interested in this? Someone who wants to attack you or I don't know, ransom information from you. Find information on a celebrity, like all of the interesting ways you can think of like who would actually want this information. And when you get into like genetics and like STI, some things that don't change, like COVID, you're like, okay, you're positive by the time they get it, the person was negative. What is the impact?
Mm.
Not that, it's still impactful because it's personal information, but all of the scenarios you can think of to protect around like who would want this information? How would they get it? Are we putting someone at risk? How can we protect these humans and like information that doesn't change about them, like their genetics? It's not
Yeah.
just a credit card number. You can just be like, yep, let me just get a new one. Like this is very important data that can be really impactful and could be life or death, right? Could potentially, depending on what's happening with them.
Mm.
So
I,
it's
I,
it's
on a
different.
personal level, I think I'm just probably, I'm just weirdly processing this as we talk. So let's kind of work through this. I don't think as an individual that I'm able to really comprehend that a company, whether it's you or, 23andMe or whoever it is,
Right.
could have a copy of, my genetics, that
Yeah.
my DNA, my sequence. And like to me, that it still feels very abstract. It's a
Yes.
thing. It's like, a little attribute about me. But I really don't think that I'm equipped yet to process the importance of that. And I think, as you're communicating risk about particularly health data sets, things like this,
Hmm.
it, do you find it challenging to talk to folks in your organization about the risk of some of these bits of data that maybe that risk is a little bit more kind of abstract rather than, you're going to physically hurt or you're going to lose some money?
Right. What I've found, and I've been in at least two healthcare companies at this point in my career, I have found that generally the people in these roles and these companies are already like very empathetic and wanting to protect people. It's almost what drove them to get
Yeah.
into this industry. So I think they're very generally, as a community, very open to like hearing about risk and wanting to protect and caring about it,
Yeah.
knowing like, oh, these are humans. This isn't just, I don't know, a bank that not, okay, I want the banks to be protected, sorry, but
All good. We
I really
understand.
like my banks, but yeah, just information that, like you said, it's health data, it's genetic data, it's things that, don't change and that we just have to look at differently. So yeah, I found that the community is just very receptive to hearing, I don't know, about how we can protect data and what we should do to be secure. So the conversations have been pretty good overall in this space that I found. A lot of people
Mm.
who really care about it in general. And when I have trouble describing things, I always just turn to analogies. And so I'm
Yeah.
just like, let me put this in a way that makes sense, even though I don't have to dive into the super technical side of it. So, yeah, but really receptive. So
That's really good. And I think perhaps, a lot of our audience are software engineers or in software engineering teams all around the world. And so I think, maybe that's a nice reminder to us as we move between industries. So perhaps you don't stay in banking forever or you start out in esports and you move somewhere else, that there is a culture inherent in the vertical that you're in that will impact the receptiveness to security. And I think that's important. So, um, you've done security across, health and, other types of organizations, Lisa. Um, would you say this is a really horrible question. I don't even know why I'm going to ask it. Forgive me in advance.
go
But
for
is it
it.
easier to do it in health because of that culture, or is it harder?
I wouldn't say easier to do it in healthcare. I think, again, generally people are more receptive to it. But I think on a higher level, having executive leadership and a company that does understand and care about security in general, it doesn't matter what vertical. And sometimes those things are very like scary risk based, like, ooh, we lose this, we're going to be fined a lot. And maybe in healthcare it's a little more like, oh, we need to do the right thing because these are humans in their
Yeah.
lives that we're affecting. But for some, it doesn't really, to get the thing done for security, it doesn't necessarily matter as long as we have buy-in from leadership. And it's not just me standing on my soapbox saying, I'd really like you to do this thing and it's really important. So really getting buy-in from stakeholders, and having like building that trust, I would say, is probably.
So I'm going to ask because people will be asking. So we've historically got this divide between us in software and the folks in security, and everyone knows it's like
Yes,
being in high school all over again, but we don't talk about it. Um,
it's true.
so, from your experience doing this so far, what helps build that kind of understanding and that buy-in from that senior level? Do you need to go hard data nerd and, you're all spreadsheets and as your love language, or is there something else?
I think for me, it really is just like starting off with that trust, the relationships that you get from people, and really understanding like they're not our enemy. We're not sitting on different sides of the cafeteria, throwing food at each other. We all have a common goal, which is to make this business successful. And maybe benefit from it a little ourselves. We get a paycheck, and
No shame in
so
that.
really making it work, and also being a good listener and hearing like what other teams are interested in and what they're working on, and not just being like, again, security, I think we do have a bad rep of kind of just forcefulness and saying this our way or the highway, must do it this way, without really giving the why. And so
Mm.
understanding, the roadblocks that our peers are facing and how they're interpreting our suggestions, and how we can just be good partners as opposed to like, nope, you just have to do it this way, and I won't budge on it. And just kind of finding the path to yes
Yeah.
with our peers.
So I think I'm just going to ask a couple of questions that gives our audience and me a bit of context. So how many people are in ColorHealth at this point? How many people are employed
I
in total?
want to say maybe 800-ish,
Okay,
or maybe
cool.
I'm overestimating. Yeah,
That's
so
great.
not
Well, finger in
like
the air is fine.
mid-size. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And in that, how many people are in the security space? So in dedicated security roles?
Um, we probably have about the standard size. I feel like security is usually like 1 to 2% of an org-ish. We're eight, and that's just security and GRC. So my org also is IT and a little bit of infrastructure. So eight overall for just security and like governance things.
That's really helpful, and I love that you said about standard, because I think what we're learning in this adventure is standard is a funny phrase.
It
So,
really is.
but no, that's good. That's good to know. And so, out of the rest of the organization, how many people are building software, give or take?
Ooh. Um, I don't actually know off the top of my head. We are definitely more focused on um, like health. So we have more health practitioners
Yeah,
than we do software engineers, whereas other companies I've been at have been definitely more software
yeah,
engineer
absolutely.
centric. Like our teams are very lean when it comes to building. Like I would say, well, I guess it depends on how the teams are divided up. Our teams are a little bit based off of products because we have very
Hmm.
different products, so they're
Yeah.
it's a little different layout. Um, but I've been part of organizations that were like 150 people, and 70 of those were like developer engineers.
Yeah, and I
So
think
this is not that organization.
that's kind of why I was bringing it up, because one of the things that we're trying to unpick a little bit is the preconceptions of what normal looks like in a company that has a lot of technology or risk in it. You know, many of us come from organizations with, 60% are engineers, and that's just
Right.
seen as normal, or that has, a 1 to 2% are security people on top of the engineers.
Yes.
But what's surprising and delighting me is there are so many incredible technologies being built out there that are used every day by thousands and thousands of people. But when you look at who's behind the technology, who's building, it's actually a very small team.
Yeah.
And so you see this big impact in the world, very small team, and then very small security team on top of that.
Yeah.
Does having that kind of, because you've got that focus towards, and quite rightly, the more healthcare practitioner side of the world,
Yep.
are there any challenges that come out of that when it comes to the more technical security controls that you're putting in place? How much of your focus would you say you have to spend on, hey, this thing we're building, is it okay? Versus, hey, people and culture and the rest of the organization and process. What would you say the split is for you as a security practitioner?
Hmm. Maybe, maybe I would say it's like 50-50 even here.
Wow.
It's a good balance. I think we definitely have the like, let's review, do design reviews and threat models and really get involved with the building. But I think a lot of it too is just kind of building the holistic security presence at the company too, and knowing when to get involved where. And we are highly regulated, so I think that probably is a good reason behind that too.
Yeah.
We have to partner heavily with like other teams on all kinds of things just because of the regulatory climate. And the company knows, right? So it's like getting through a compliance audit is like, oh no, we know what this is. Like this is very familiar because
Yeah.
it's not the first time we've seen this. We have healthcare data. Like we are okay with the terms and understanding what this means to us. Where some, I think it's just different at every company, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to do a lot more prepping and education around those things.
So, kind of, I've got this nice section that I like to ask people about challenges, team. So,
Yeah.
poor Lisa here, she's like, what's she going to ask me? But it's okay.
I'm ready.
So what would you say is the hardest part then? You've got good culture, you've got people already prepped for doing this, you've got a good 50-50 split between what you're doing, you already get the audit thing and it doesn't feel like a burden because you're regulated and you get it. I love all of this. So what sucks? What's hurting?
I know. I'm like, I'm just making it sound like nothing is ever wrong at any company. No.
It's basically rainbows everywhere right now.
No, I am an optimistic person, but I'm not insane. And I know that it's not perfect. Um, what is the hard parts? I think really being able to prioritize what we should be doing when, and especially being a smaller team, there's so much we want to do, and like for good reason. Like, oh, it'd be so cool if we could do this, and we really want to get to this thing, but really being able to prioritize what's important for the company. And hopefully sprinkle in some like, what do people actually want to work on? Like maybe some
Mm.
cool stuff we want to be learning in the meantime, and how can we help like our partners, and how can we reach the goals of the company while still kind of doing security. So I think part of it really is just like prioritizing the work and what comes first, and not being able to do a little bit of everything. So
Do you think there's ever a size of team where you're able to get through everything we have to do in
no,
security? No.
no,
I'm
no,
feeling
I
the
don't
more
think
I look
so.
at this, the more I think we're just pushing boulders up hills. Um,
That's a good question though, because I think sometimes we uncover things as we go, and everything changes, right? The technology changes, the company's changing, the products are changing. So, in a good way, it's a ever changing cycle of things. Like, oh, we're all going to Kubernetes. All right, let's figure out how we're going to deploy Kubernetes. Or oh, today we're going to be multi-cloud, or I don't know, whatever random thing your company is deciding to do.
I think probably it's
So
probably AI right now, if I'm honest.
yeah, AI. Yeah, let's use, how are we going to integrate Chat GPT or Copilot into everything we do?
Okay, awesome. So I think this has given us a good perspective. Firstly, the health space has so many different types of data that I don't think many of us have ever really had to think about processing or protecting before. But the culture is different from organizations who haven't been around that space because they're already aware that it's harmful to humans if these things go wrong. You've got a small team, but it's hard to prioritize. So how rapidly can you do change in an organization in health? So, and we were joking here about, ChatGPT and Kubernetes and whatnot, but,
Yeah.
From, a hype end of the scale where we've got, folks who are deploy 100 times a day, let's move fast and break stuff, down
Yep.
to I release every 3 years because I'm on an oil rig. Where are we on the
Right.
scale?
We definitely deploy several times a day, like ability to. So we're pretty like modern SaaS company in that way, I guess. um, Yeah, so yeah, I would say we're like a technology company in that way. And
Yeah.
I think also because of the size, like startups, I feel generally have an easier time adapting to change, because there's not a lot of red tape. There's not like we're not
Mm,
there's no waterfall method because like we don't have go to the change committee. It's like, okay, it's a person, right?
yeah.
Like what is this going to be? It's like getting things through is a much smaller
Yeah.
sprint as opposed to changing like this big policy and procedures that maybe larger companies have. So in that way we can be kind of experiment with new technologies and deploy things quickly because our stack's going to be smaller, and our the people we have to get it through is a smaller group of people, so you're literally going to talk to the stakeholders like once a week at least.
This is really interesting. I think I had assumed, and quite wrongly it seems, that because of the regulation, because it was health, it would be slower. And it's really cool to hear that actually, just because you're in a regulated industry, just because the data is sensitive, it doesn't stop you from doing those things. You've just got to be mindful when you are. Um,
Yes, yeah.
so
We're super mindful. I think that's the thing too, is knowing like the space you can play in and test things out, and then being like, if you have a really good idea about what you're doing for security and you feel safe there, then yeah, then you make the
that's
space to experiment.
Yeah, that I think, and that's a really positive message. I think that it's not about what vertical you're in. It's about creating that sense of safety for you to know the risks, know how they're being managed, and then you can experiment within the constraints that you have. Um,
Yeah.
so what's the direction of health going? Like, this is like the airy fairy hand wavy question, like future,
Yeah.
Lisa, what do you see? Um, okay. So what's the future of health technology? Where's it going?
Hmm. Um, That's a good question. I'm actually am speaking of all the technology and AI and natural language processing tools. I think that's an interesting space, and I think we can totally leverage it in healthcare too. Like not just from maybe working with our coding technologies and just helping us be better, not doing things for us, but like really coaching us on how to be better, like programmers, but also from the healthcare perspective, just being able to take that and say, I don't know, maybe AI will have really good responses to questions our patients are asking that we can pool all the doctors and, have them create this database of solid knowledge and we can
Mm.
pull from there. And not that everybody wants to talk to like a robot for therapy or anything, but maybe some of us do actually.
I feel like some validation we need to do there.
Yes, we need to. I was like, no one needs to hear this except a non-human. So I think there's some opportunity, or yeah, there's some really people that I'm not sure of all where the space is today, but like some really cool opportunity to um, have patients like be able to take what they're saying and turn that into something, as opposed to using like, oh, I have one doctor who specializes in this one thing and has a very specific opinion, kind of like see, get your you have something wrong with you and you're like, I'll get a second opinion, I'll get a third opinion. Well, maybe we can get those opinions using technology. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. Yeah.
I think this is cool, and I think it's a good time for us to be looking ahead like this. Even if you're in a regulated industry, regulation,
Yeah.
helps us stay within the confines of known safety.
Yep.
There's a tool behind it, but regulation tends to be retrospective. It looks back at what we have done before rather than what we will do in the future. Where do
Yeah.
you see, just to kind of ask you a hairy question to round this out, where do you see regulation will go for where security meets, sensitive data such as healthcare data? Do
Yeah.
you think it's going to get more restrictive, or do you think it will adapt to the new technologies we're seeing pushed through?
I hope it adapts, but honestly, I think it probably will be more restrictive. I think the first response is always very like tighten controls. Like we see it with privacy in general right now, where it's like, oh no, we should be more and more restrictive, and more countries and states are tightening down on their requirements. Um, and for good reason, like you said, like regulation, it's there for a reason. And we want to protect our data, but at the same time, protect our data without, hindering like innovation and things that could help us. So yeah, healthcare, education, government, we don't have the best the best model for that. We're kind of seen as archaic, right? Like
I think,
but
yeah, it's interesting. You've either got the anarchy of no regulation, or you've got, fairly restrictive schemes at the moment. And I hope there'll be a middle ground with time. So
yes.
I'm going to ask you for a call to action or a tip to give our audience before we say goodbye today. So if you were talking to someone who is building amazing things in the health space or pondering it one day,
Yep.
what's one tip you might give them for, bringing security into their world?
My tip would be to build relationships and trust with your stakeholders and your partners, because relationships matter and they go a long way, especially in security. I've just seen it go so sideways when we come across as like the Department of No, and just not as partners, as opposed to like just being there to be good advisors and consultants and direct folks to the safe way of doing things, but not just saying no. So I think that would be my advice. Like you can reach your security goals, and a lot of it, I think, more than we think, relies on the relationships we make.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important lesson. Health is a very human space. We are humans, and we work much better when we connect with each other properly and communicate. So using that as a superpower seems like a really good tip for the audience. Well, our time has come to an end, Lisa.
Oh,
It has been
thank you so
amazing.
much.
I'm still going to be thinking about how on earth I protect my DNA sequence and whether that ship has already sailed, but that's okay. That means I've food for thought. And if any of our audience are thinking about similar things, pop in the comments and have a chat. Would be good to see how people are thinking about this, complex space of us as people and our data and our health results and how we keep that safe. So thank you so much for your time, Lisa. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and we'll see everyone soon.